Next presentation, we'll have two speakers. Our first speaker is Dorota Biczel, who is a Polish-born writer, independent researcher, and curator. She holds a master's degree in graphics from the Warsaw Academy of Fine Arts in Poland, a dual MA in modern art history, theory, and criticism, and arts administration and policy from the School of the Art Institute in Chicago, and is currently pursuing a PhD in art history at the University of Texas at Austin. Currently, her main focus is neo-conceptual art in Peru, its development during the Peruvian Civil War, and the challenge of its narration after the fall of the dictatorship. Emilio Tarazona is an independent art critic and curator. His essays on contemporary Peruvian art have been published in newspapers, exhibition catalogs, and books, including most recently Cristina Fierez and Anna Longoli's Conceptualism from the South, and South, the seventh International Symposium on Theory about Abstract Art. He was co-curator of La Persistencia de lo Efemero, Orígenes del Objetualismo en el Perú, and Subversive Practices, Art Under Conditions of Political Repression from the 60s to the 80s, South America, Europe. I invite them both on stage.
Hello, thank you so much for the invitation. I wanted to thank Emilia, first of all, for her amazing organizational support. Carmen, the Smithsonian, and the Terra Foundation for this really stimulating event. Mm-hmm. And I should add that we practically just came back from Germany. We opened the retrospective exhibition of Teresa at the Kunstverein in Stuttgart that we worked on with our colleague Miguel Lopez. Mm-hmm. So without further ado, I will let Emilio start.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Well, let's start. The arrival of the Peruvian vanguardist TERESA BURGA at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago coincided with that radical ferment of the American artistic scene. The period of her Fulbright Fellowship at SAIC between 1968 and 1970 occurred during an explosion of barbarity of new, yet uncodified phenomena, which under a myriad of monikers, conceptual, concept, idea, or information art, antiform, systems, earth, or process art, sought to redefine not only the art object itself, but also the artwork, spectator interaction. They all pushed back against Greenbergian formalists and called for total reconfiguration of artistic production. Between that array, not categorical boundaries existed, yet between that would later become canonized as conceptual art, and a variety of experiments with new media and information technologies that soon after would be dismissed due of the fear of a spectacle and total social control. In this paper, we will focus on two of Burga's mature projects: the installation self-portrait structure report 9672 from 1972 and Four Messages from 1974, in order to show how they formulate a critical alternative to the canonized, narrowly defined models of conceptualism through the pivotal juncture of language-based proposal and objects or experiences based in media and technology. As we will discuss, the studies in Chicago provide Burga with a new set of tools, allowing her to combine her interest in a notion of artwork as an idea and information theory with the new ways of materializing abstract numerical or linguistic data. By analyzing the juncture between language, media, and embodied experience in Burga's work, we can uncover a unique, viable proposition that has been obscured by the dominant discourses of the location of its emergence. Preserved mostly as text-based proposals and dryly executed diagrams, at first glance, Burga's work seems to adhere strictly to the aesthetic of administration. However, her core proposals undermine the hegemony of linguistic and more broadly representational structures upon which the notorious formulation of conceptualists rely upon. Hence, they reveal gaps and cracks between different description systems that regiment the subjectivity and the body and ceaselessly limit realm and of possibilities of an individual agency. Burga, born in Iquitos, Peru in 1935, came to SAIC at the age of 33 as an experienced member of Arte Nuevo, New Art, a Peruvian experimental group that had crystallized around the prominent critic and theorist Juan Hacha. Between 1966 and 1969, New Art not only introduces fresh aesthetic proposals, such as local variation of geometric abstraction, pop, op art, and environments, but also fought the centralization and monopolization of artistic discourse by the established system of competitions and exhibition venues. For Burga, this early association constituted a definitive break into expressionist models of art-making dominant at the School of Plastic Arts of the Pontifical Catholic University of Peru, where she had studied and promoted by such upper echelons of Peruvian art as Fernando de Cislo. Her works from mid-60s are important manifestations of her attempts to reject traditionally understood artistic subjectivity. Believed to reside in the author's unique hand and gesture and expressing her essential self as the execution delegated to craftsmen and assistants. Moreover, the modular geometric objects designed by Burga, such as prisms and cubes, conform to the definition of a system elaborated by the Argentine critic Jorge Klusberg, co-founder of CAIC, Center of Art and Communications in Buenos Aires. The system is a grouping of entities which organize and articulate themselves in relation to one another in a dynamic process that cannot be understood either individually or outside of the frame of the mutual interdependence. In Burga's three-dimensional works, the multiplicity of internal possibilities and their codependence is enacted by highly orchestrated arrangement of visual symbols, forms, and colors which allow to reconfigure the pieces in a variety of ways. Burga's emergent systematic thinking and anti-institutional leanings found a fertile ground in the turmoil of the '68 Chicago. She had applied for the Fulbright in order to further pursue the subjectivization and temporality within her work, and settled for Chicago as New York was not available within the scope of the program. At that time, due mostly of the pressure exerted by the radicalized student body, SAIC went through a decisive transformation, revamping its curriculum, opening up narrowly defined departments, introducing seminars in new media, such as Professor Sonia Sheridan's Future Generative System program, which will embrace the newest recording and imaging technologies, and allowing students to create their own courses of study with faculty consultation. No wonder SAIC chose Burga over another Peruvian applicant, printmaker José Carlos Ramos, supported by the Catholic University of Peru. The interests of Burga and new spirit of the school were a good match. The Chicago experience allowed Burga to refashion her practice through utilization of text, technology, and communication media. Her first ventures into this new realm took place on the page of the 70 magazine, the platform developed to host a variety of experimental, ephemeral, and utopian projects that did not find an outlet in the city's gallery scene, dominated by the popular Chicago imagists. The 70s sought to present the form of free sensibility, I'm quoting, a sensibility that seeks qualities of invention that disregard the constraint of commercial model. The structure of the majority of Burga's mature work crystallized itself on its page in an idiosyncratic fusion of new methods she had been introduced to through visiting artists such as Joseph Kossuth, Robert Barry, Vito Acconci, and Dennis Oppenheim. Not without repercussions were also exhibitions, especially art by telephone, in a newly established Museum of Contemporary Art in '69, in which all the pieces were created, either constructed or performed by the museum staff based on the instructions that invited artists delivered over the phone. And also, Kate Saunier-like sculptures show in '69 Biennial American Exhibition at Art Institute of Chicago in 1970. From '69 on, the text-based proposal and diagrams constitute the primary basis of Burga oeuvre and assert the role of the artist as a creator of ideas. The paradigm of conceptual art as manifest in the concise, sterile instructions and piece provides, which aptly compare with the methods of Sol-Levitt. Yet simultaneously, they put 4 encounters with seemingly desmaterialized but highly experiential structures prevalent in a minimal, post-minimal, and technology-based art. So, is the case with the work that disappears when the spectator is trying to approach it. A proposal for a light installation. That is the proposal looks like in the first materialization of the work in 2007. The redefinition of what might be an object of art is crucial here. And it shows Burga's deep interest in light sculpture of Saunier. Similarly, structures of air, with its deployment of invisible substance as the material for the work, brings to mind another frequent guest, as SAIC, Robert Barry, and his '69 Inner Gas series, in which the artist released various gases into atmosphere. Yet, in addition, in Burga's project, strictly measured and contained time becomes a crucial component backering experience of the viewer, key actor of these encounters. As opposed to Saunier, light installations, Burga's work is not given once and for all. It is contingent upon the viewer's action in space and ultimately dispirited by her proximity. And if Barry's gesture of releasing gas into the atmosphere can only be recognized as art a posteriori, based on the description of solitarily performed act, Burga's elaborate structures of air function in relation to the viewer, even if they are destroyed by her intrusion. So, this critical juncture of language, media, and material experience becomes the crux of Burga's work throughout the '70s. First conceived in Chicago, an expensive installation self-portrait structure report 96-1972 was shown in the first major exhibition following the artist's return to Peru, held at IBNA, Peruvian North American Cultural Institute, in 1972. Under the familiar concept of a self-portrait, the installation combined diagrams, photographs, objects, and a variety of medical records. In the self-portrait, the artist himself is dissected into a number of scientifically quantifiable elements: a face, a heart, and blood. Those physical characteristics are registered in just one day, September 6, 1972. The facial features are photographed and carefully gauged, the face topographically mapped out, the heartbeat is recorded through electro and phonocardiograms, and the blood is analyzed. It is as if a systematic register of both external and internal organs, and the chemical composition could exhaustively describe a person. On a given day, at a given place, the subject is nothing more than the sum of its measurable parts that can become an object of a never-ending and never so much minute analysis. What is this highly analogous accumulation of information? How to read it? Looking at another piece of the same period, Identification from 1973, might illuminate the answer. In this text-based work, Burga proposed a similar, because nearly forensic, examination of an individual. The artist aims to compile an exhaustive register of facts about a subject, from finger and palm prints to the shoe's sole pattern and the timbre of the voice. In addition, her own account, she calls it, in quotation mark, the direct data of the investigated individual to be complemented by a similarly thorough report, a witness, we quote, the indirect data. That's right.
So when examining the documents in the self-portrait or the type of data to be collected in the identification, it is striking that there is a police-like procedure that's being employed. 3 stark photographs of the artist, the object of the self-portrait, are a frontal view and a left and a right profile. With their expressionless, blank stares, they are not unlike mugshots. Precise measurements describe the length of the nose and the chin, the height of the forehead, the width of the eye and the eye socket, and the distances between nostrils. Multiple aspects of the body are quantified and registered, creating an unmistakable, individualized case or file on the subject Teresa Burga. Such examination, whether medical or policial, is not a benign mean. Above all, it is a tool of biopolitical power, as Michel Foucault argued. Through measurements, description, notation, accumulation of documents, constitution of files and archives, through, quote, arranging facts in columns and tables, end quote, that is through statistics, the power quantifies the norms and designates deviations, producing in the end the docile individualized subject. In these procedures, biopower relies on the efficacy of description, on, and I quote again, the power of writing as an essential part in the mechanism of discipline, end quote. But does Burga's work really provide any kind of evidence? Do her documents capture and fix her subjects? Rather than supply or augment a disciplinary system, they subtly subvert it, and they do so by exposing its self-contained and self-referential limitedness. Even in the text-only piece, such as identification, there is an element that can disturb the order of the archive. There is no guarantee of proof in the confrontation of direct and indirect data provided by the author and the witness. A process of transmission or relaying information, whether through direct interrogation or dictation of instructions over the phone, is not really a description, but rather a complex and dynamic system of sending, transmitting, and receiving, susceptible to feedback and distortion. 2 accounts on the same subject might very well produce discrepancies and disagreements, insecurity rather than any indisputable confirmed fact. Conversely, the self-portrait does not solely consist of the quantifiable data on the body inscribed by numbers and letters. They have been thought out to be supplanted by material objects that transpose the content of the documents. Transposition from a medium to medium, as media theorist Friedrich Kittler claims, implies that the source information must necessarily and somewhat arbitrarily be reconfigured. And so, the blood analysis is to be rendered in a series of prismatic structures, each paralleling every single chemical component. And the hard object in the self-portrait takes on yet more complex multisensorial form. A recording of Burga's own heartbeat, its rhythmical sound permeating the exhibition space, is used to regulate the pulsation of simple light structure, a sleek elongated case housing a long sequence of red Christmas lights. This object cannot be properly read or decoded. Instead, it manifests the incongruity between the material thing and its experience, between the sensation of sound, rhythm, and flickering light, and the cool database that has been accumulated on supposedly the very same subject. Therefore, statistic is revealed not as a perfect medium of description, but rather as an imperative of a historical, and I quote, despotic, indeed murderous command to limit data to what the medium script could exhaust, end quote. From the noise of the media and experience, only small factual details would be extracted, the details that could be fully classified and provide the subjectifying evidence in form of the letters. However, in reality, the discourse and the media are not equivalent. In Burga's self-portrait, it is manifest that there are impassable gulfs between every single element of the piece, even if they are all supposed to encompass just one body. In Burga's mature production, no other piece makes such rifts so acutely experiential as the installation for messages. Perhaps because in its case, the artist was actually able to physically and technically follow her project through, unlike the self-portrait, which to a degree have remained paper-based proposal. So 4 verbal statements were randomly selected from Peruvian national television on December 27, 1973, precisely at 1, 2, 7, and 9 p.m., and radically reconfigured. The extracted messages are transposed into a variety of communication media, resulting in 4, materially very distinct, transmissions of information. So the first message comprises the fragmented vision of a technological device through a slight projection of close-up views of a calculator. The second message features the black and white film footage of a face making 3 silent grimaces. As the face itself is in cropping too, its expressions cannot be easily deciphered. They do not stand either for emoticons or the pain face scale from a doctor's office. The third message consists of highly visual, graphic transposition of a text into a series of, into a series of 3 typewritten rebuses. Its first variation converts each word of the message into typewritten triangular graphs, whose structure and size are determined by the number of letters in the word. The second variation consists of a text in which every word of the original phrase is replaced by its dictionary definition, rendering any sensible or secure reading impossible. The third rebus presents a series of small, rectangular, empty grids onto which the relative position of each letter of the alphabet within the original message is mapped out. Each letter is positioned within its own hollow square, cutting off any immediate relationship to its initial context. Each one of the rectangular schemes is in itself an abstract and a nonsensical pattern, but their accumulation constitutes a dissected order of the entire statement. Finally, the fourth message is the lo-fi playback of a recording of distorted sounds, voices, music, and ambient noises. Through these transpositions, what once might have been an easily palatable, understandable, transparent message of the mass media becomes a barrage of opaque and practically incomprehensible material. Burga's procedure is therefore a precise opposite of, quote again, modern command to limit data to script. She subjects the script to the logic of the media, and as a consequence, it comes out hallucinatory and undifferentiated. While the mediatic presence asserts the factuality or reality of the statement, it also reveals the radical dependency on established, agreed-upon, hegemonic representation systems, on the order of the word and the order of images inscribed as script or signifiers. So, if critical conceptualism effectively scrutinized ideological basis of representation, and we're going to come back to that thought, be it linguistic or visual, exposing it as an equally dangerous and constitutive means to establishing subjectivity, it did not necessarily succeed in evading the representation system, which could at best be reconfigured or reprogrammed. However, when in the third message, Burga takes up the statement from a didactic discourse on environmental awareness, which states, against the deadly threat of pollution, green areas are great lungs that purify the environment in which we breathe, so let's fight the pollution by. The manipulative power of the script falls away and disappears into the dense matter of the typewritten marks. It is not that we have escaped the system, but rather we have been transposed into a different one, into a different logic, the logic in which the internal relationships between individual elements operate according to alternative rules, which, from the perspective of the hegemony of the word, produce nothing but noise. Under Burga's scrutiny, the seemingly stable things and concepts reveal themselves as complex, fluctuating constellations, the characteristics of which permanently morph and that can only be accounted for through time and place-specific procedures. Hence, Burga's operations undermine the linguistically fixed images transmitted by the hegemonic representation systems to which she has always had a profound aversion, regardless of whether they were the ideology of the Vietnam War or the 1968 so-called Peruvian Revolution of General Velasco Alvarado. To some extent, the history of her disappearance from the American or Peruvian art scene mirrors the intellectual conflict with such ideological systems. Burga returned to Peru in 1971, as stipulated by the Fulbright Fellowship requirements. In principle, the idea was that the fellows would utilize their newly acquired knowledge and skills in their homelands. Soft power operations aside, the fact is that the proposals that Burga had developed while in the US were not welcomed under the cultural policy of populist nationalism of the leftist dictatorship of General Juan Velasco Alvarado, which basically rejected everything that it considered foreign. There was no room for the loss of control or ambiguity, which Burga's proposal inadvertently postulates. Even her old ally, critic Juan Acha, who in the meantime had coined the critical term no objetualismo, admonished Burga for, and I quote, not extending the reality to the objective social conditions, end quote, and creating uncertain situations in which the spectator would not be told explicitly what to think or how to assess what is presented. As Yves Meltzer has persuasively argued, in the dominant structuralist views of the epoch, and I quote, the world has become a network of systems, and being a subject in that world meant being subjected to those systems, end quote. This logic operated equally strongly in diverse models of conceptualisms, in tautological propositions of Joseph Kossuth, in Barry's inert gases, which can only be seen as art based on the verbal statements of the performed action. And the same logic also underlays seemingly radically distinct institutional critique or Hans Hacke, or even Juan Acha's engaged didactic no-objetualismo aimed at dissolving false consciousness. Yet, as Meltzer said, the dream or a nightmare, and I quote, of the world as a total sign system sometimes promised revolution, but just as often threatened to completely dissociate cause and effect, signed and referent, subject and the world, end quote. Certainly, Burga was aware of the human contingents, yet she also sought a way out of relentless models of subjectification. Just as philosopher Willem Flusser, she recognized that we can change our contingents, but we can only do so by exchanging it, by emigrating from one system to another. For TERESA BURGA, such productive space of emigration existed between Lima and Chicago, between the system of writing and systems configured by physical objects and communication media, between language as inscription and language as a tool for communication. And hence, her production gently combines the attitudes and approaches that the subsequent art history divided, categorized, and judged, separating words from bodily experience and a babble of media and technology. Therefore, in our close look at Burga's work, there is more at stake than just rewriting a certain kind of geography of experimental artistic practice. There is also a question of recognition and the movement between discourses, which not only historically categorized and divided the West from the South, but also eliminated internal idiosyncrasies and contradictions. Burga's relentless desire to expose both the most symbolically charged and the most fleeting and nonsensical details of her surroundings encourages us to examine the current state of our perception and the allegiance that we pledge, to discern what does and what does not count in our written reports on the real. Thank you.
Thank you very much.